Hello and welcome to another edition of the Door 14 Hockey Podcast. I'm your host Marty alongside Dave
Hello.
and John.
Sláinte, what about you?
It's technically it's an off-season special. What we call it? It's off-season for us because obviously we are in start of June, so we are now technically about a month and a half, 2 months nearly into our official off-season here in the UK. Obviously the Stanley Cup is still ongoing, which we will talk about in period two. Hence the reason I'm currently wearing, for anybody who's watching the YouTube, who's not watching YouTube, I'm currently wearing my Vegas Golden Knights jersey.
Talk about jumping on a bandwagon. I mean, who on earth would just abandon their team and jump on a bandwagon like that? It's absolutely shocking, Marty.
Let's not look at John, Dave, and Aaron, who decided to jump on the bandwagon when the Leafs were going into the second round of the Stanley Cup this year, and they were like, "Let's all buy jerseys." And I blame you guys for the reason why the Maple Leafs were kicked out, because you all bought jerseys, and then all of a sudden.
Hey, don't come at me. Just because I found a piece of crap in a charity shop a couple of years ago and just happened to have it on that night. That was no bandwagoning for me.
Convenient. Guys, how you doing? Dave, how are you doing?
Good. Yeah. Just the usual. Enjoying the off season.
Good.
Stuff done around the house.
So you're looking forward to the season starting again, so you don't have to do as much. And John, what about yourself? How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I'm in the middle of some extended time off work to look after my daughter before she starts nursery in a couple of weeks. So I've had a brilliant start to the summer and the off season. It's been fantastic. Loved it.
I think officially we probably could call it summer. Well, I know here in Northern Ireland we're calling it summer because our 2 weeks of summer, which happens around June time, is now currently in effect. The weather has been amazing, so we'll call it. I'm officially calling it summer. But I'm sure that'll only last for at least another, I'd say maybe week and a half, and then we're back to rain again. But we'll try and appreciate what we do have for now. Anyway.
Do you know what? It's fine. We need rain for water for ice, so it's grand.
True. Guys, as I mentioned already at the top of this episode, it is our off season. So our off season here in the UK means a lot of stories, a lot of coming and going, and a lot of signing news, and just general, just usual Elite League stuff happening around the whole of the UK. We have an action-packed I suppose running order for tonight. We haven't spoken since the season came to an end at the end of April, and we haven't really had a chance to sit down and we haven't talked about any of this stuff yet. So some of these stories will be maybe old news, shall we call it, because people will know all about it. It's been around for maybe a week or two, maybe three, but it's definitely stories that we have wanted to talk about, especially 2 or 3 of the bits and pieces. So if it does sound like old news, I don't really care. We'll chat about it. And actually, to be fair, when we put out today on Twitter, we did put out some like the usual call for action on Twitter, asking people to kind of give us what their take or what we should be talking about. A couple of these things did come up, and it was old news, but it is people wanted to hear what we thought about certain bits and pieces. So we will be talking about quite a bit here coming up. We'll have our usual regular podcast, period 1, 2, and 3. Obviously, we have stories for each of them. Guys, I don't have anything else as a warm up, so I think without. Let's just get stuck into it because it is going to be a long one, I'm going to guess. So let's get stuck into our period 1 of hockey. After what is probably the shortest intro we've ever done on this show, we're straight into our period 1 of hockey. Period 1, for anybody who's new around here, is just a roundup of news stories from around the UK, taking in all and any leagues at all. Let's start first off with the Elite Ice Hockey League. You'll notice I said Elite Ice Hockey League. We're going to come back to that because it's a question for later on. But the Elite League did announce the first story I'm going to talk about is obviously the Elite League had their general meeting in May there, in which they talk about fixtures, and the fixtures are complete now, and all we're waiting on is for the teams or each team just to confirm, I suppose just cement in those dates and make sure that their arenas and stuff are free for the dates that were discussed and agreed on. But one of the big things coming out of those discussions as well was the official, I suppose, announcement of probably the worst kept secret in UK hockey for over the end of towards the end of the season, and that is that the league has 10 members have agreed on the roster regulations for the 2023-2024 season. The number of players on a game day roster will remain at 20, and that will comprise of 18 skaters and 2 netminders. A maximum of 15 non-homegrown players, i.e. imports, will be permitted each team's game day roster in the 2023-2024 season. There is no change to the overall roster size for the season, which remains at 29 players, including two-way players, but excluding injury reserve cover. The total number of non-homegrown players a team may sign in one season, excluding injury reserve cover, remains at 20. They have the Elite League. I suppose Tony Smith, the chairman of the Elite League, stated, "We want to continue to improve the competitiveness and the standard of the product, which saw record crowds and over 1 million spectators during the 2022-2023 season. And as a league, every team is committed to making the Elite League the best level of hockey that it can be. And we're sure our fans will be excited to see teams back on the ice come September. We are delighted to support the Great Britain national team and are proud that 90% of the players that won promotion to the elite group of this year's World Championship players, spoiler alert, as well as coaches, as the biggest indoor sport in the UK, we're keen to work with Ice Hockey UK to further the development of British hockey players coming through the junior systems across the country. We will continue discussing with Ice Hockey UK over the coming weeks to help form a joint strategy for the short, medium and long-term development of GB talent." Obviously, this is coming out of the fact that the import level is increasing, local talent is going to go down, and therefore they're kind of trying to say we need to put something in place to kind of appease UK hockey is the gist of what I was getting.
Can we just very, very quickly say, Anthony, sit down? We know.
Yes. The first person that came to mind was Anthony. That was the first person that came to mind when his statement was put out. And it is, guys, I mean, let's get your take on it, Dave. Let's come to you first. I mean, obviously Tony Smith, or the chairman of the Elite League, coming out and saying what he's saying. Obviously, it's trying to calm things down a bit, knowing the fact that by increasing the import limits and reducing the local homegrown talent, is going to irk some people, probably.
Yeah, I'm never a fan of increasing the imports in the way they do. I don't. It's sort of a false economy. It's a short-term gain, but long-term, it's going to impact the ability for the league clubs to draw British talent. Yes, they'll have probably a good few big, high-money Brits that they'll be able to bring in, but unless they're able to make a good deal with other leagues, I personally think that two ways shouldn't be included in the total to allow more two-way Brits to get experience in the Elite League and to foster more interaction with the other leagues, and to just not arbitrarily, I suppose all 10 teams apparently must have agreed to this, but to me it just seems a bit of a backward step.
Yeah, I mean, John, Dave said it there. Dave mentioned about the fact that those two-way contracts this year for some players have really paid off, and again, potential spoilers there as well. But for some that really has paid off in terms of that two-way kind of aspect in terms of the development. I mean, what's your take in terms of obviously what the comments that have been made and the increase of the import? We obviously talked about this in a prior podcast. Obviously the people paying their money, people want the best product on the ice, etc., etc., etc. But what's your take on this?
I think I've said before that the stance of the league is that it's not a development league. It is a league and it's a business which is in the business of making money by putting a product in front of people and selling seats to that product. This happens to be ice hockey in this business. The best way to do that for them, or as far as they see, is to put the import limit up and bring what they see as being a better product, because they don't see as potentially as much value in the local game. It's kind of I do agree with Dave that I don't think the two ways should be included. That seems self-defeating. And you said it, Marty, the two ways have been instrumental for a few players. You just have to look at the Belfast Giants roster last season, look at the two-way deals that were in place there, and look at the people who helped actually win a trophy. We're going to talk about them later on. Norris is a prime example of that. So yeah, there's pluses and minuses. What I will say is I do think there's a massive plus in this piece that's been put out on the Elite League website, and that is the fact that you've got the league chairman for possibly the first time actually talking about how the Elite League can support the GB national team and how it can support youth development. This is the first time the Elite League in any way has taken any step towards that we want to support development. They might still say that they're not a development league, but they have at least said, look, we actually do value the British players coming through. We value the fact that GB is back in top flight. We want to keep it there. As a business, what the Elite League should be looking at is the fact that if you've got GB playing against top level opponents from elsewhere, it's not just about playing against them. They're sharing facilities with these guys for a week and a half, 2 weeks. They are chatting to guys who might be getting contacted by Elite League teams, and they're wanting to know what's the crack here. If I go to Belfast, if I go to Sheffield, if I go to Nottingham, if I go to Fife, what am I walking into? And that's that opportunity that you can't buy that opportunity. You have to develop it with the young players to keep that team in the top tier. So like I say, there's pluses and minuses to this, and people are going to get on their soapboxes for the entire season. This is not just something that people are going to get angry about right now, want or be happy about, because they're going to see this fantastic product for the next season. This conversation will keep going, and it'll keep going as teams tap into their injury reserves as well and bring in new guys, and roster numbers go up. I mean, we saw it at the back end of this season, everyone saying that for some reason they think that Belfast was the revolving door this year. Yes, there were a couple of guys who got shipped out early doors. There were a couple of guys who were then laid up at the back end of the season for one reason or another. But we didn't ever go over the roster limit. The roster limit was brought in because you had the likes of Nottingham and Sheffield, who were revolving door teams. They were going through, they were just churning guys in and out. So now you've got that limit there. It's there. Stop complaining. If a team goes over 29 signed players in the season, yes, have a go at them. If they win everything, yes, have a go at them and say it's not right. They shouldn't have done it. But Giants, Grand Slam, stayed within the rules. Shut up. Don't care.
Oh, you had to get that in anyway. Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting one. Obviously, I've seen a lot of replies and a lot of feedback and outcry, I suppose, on Twitter, as we usually do on the Elite League Twitter. And I know there was a couple of people who were obviously commenting about these changes and stuff. And there was a few interesting comments about, obviously, we are seeing a change in the guard, if you will, within British hockey at the moment. In terms of, we're seeing players who are stepping down and moving away from playing. We're seeing players retiring this season. We've seen major names change this season, people moving away and everything else, and it's an interesting one, because obviously there is an argument, as we said, that if we've got less players, if there's more players retiring, and therefore more players are developing and still at quite a young age, then there maybe isn't the same pool of the talent that they need for the Elite League at the moment. Again, Anthony's sitting at home basically pulling his hair out and yelling at us. We will have you on it eventually, don't worry. We do have plans in motion. I will say that.
We're not going to tell you those plans, though. We're just
I'll be in touch with them. And we will talk about it. But yeah, it's an interesting one. But again, as you say, before we move on, I to look at signings for this year so far, I guess you're right, John, in terms of the statement that was put out. Was surprising. First part, it felt like it was a bit of firefighting, because they kind of knew what the response might be. But on the other hand, the fact that Tony Smith has openly said, we're acknowledging the fact that there is an issue here, or we're acknowledging the fact that there has to be development, we're acknowledging the fact that we need it to work as a league to help develop future talent. So there is a bit of a positive spin on that too, coming out of it. guys, let's before we talk about specific player signings and retirements and everything else, which we are going to talk about in a few minutes because there's been quite a lot, obviously, since last time recorded. Let's take a look at two major news stories. I say major news stories, well, big ones. First one let's talk about is the Cardiff Devils. Obviously, at the end of the season, following the playoff final weekend, we seen the Devils on the Monday morning pretty much announced that their head coaching team was being let go and were fired and whatever else, or parted ways, shall we say, politely, in a nice way. Not fired, parted ways. But the Devils have confirmed that they're going to go ahead with this year with behind the bench. This year they're going to have none other than head coach of Team GB, Pete Russell. I mean, that's a statement. I think, obviously, we're talking about Team GB and we're talking about everything else. We know Pete Russell and his caliber with the Team GB and his commitment and his his connection with Team GB. Now going to be behind the Devils bench moving forward. Dave, I mean, for the Devils, I mean, this is probably a smart move to sign Pete.
Yeah, a proven entity, fantastic coach, and we know what he can do. And he's the ear of an awful lot of GB players, which will never be a bad thing. Yeah, I think it's definitely a stand-up move. It's a marker they've put down to see how the rest of the league reacts, and it's great to have him home again.
And John, I mean, obviously, Russell has spent the last 4 seasons coaching in Germany, various different leagues, Dell, top end teams, coming out of things like Augsburg Panthers, those types of. Lost the final year of Augsburg Panthers. He was playing for. He was coaching in Freiburg and Ravensburg and those different bits and pieces. I mean, that type of caliber and credit to and that type of, I suppose, experience that he's gained from there is only going to help kind of coming into the obviously coming back, shall we say, and moving into moving it forward for the Devils. Do you think this is the right move for the Devils in terms of obviously they've complained about obviously they've had fan base crying out for that they had a poor season last season? Is this the right? Do you think this is the move that needed to be made in order to first of all appease fans and show that there is they're trying to steady the ship in some way with bringing in a high caliber coach, or what's your take on this?
I think it's pretty clear that if there was disquiet with them, the Red Army, then that has been quelled with this. Although he's Scottish and from Ayr, Pete has history with Cardiff. He, I think, coached in the juniors with the Cardiff organisation for a while at the start of his coaching career. But that's not what's going to have quieted the Cardiff Devils fans, and that's not what will have the Cardiff Devils backroom excited. He is proven talent. He is the architect amongst a few other names, but he is essentially the architect of Team GB being where they are now. And let's not take away the fact that this season just passed. He's just won the Del 2. He took Ravensburg to the championship. So within a few days of winning the Del 2, which there's people out there who will talk about it being a comparable league to the Elite League. They're kidding themselves. The Del 2 is above the Elite League. So Pete is proven quality, and he is coming back to GB. He's coming back to Cardiff. If they get their signing right this year, they will be a force. He can coach, and he can coach championship teams. So I'm excited to see what he does with the Cardiff Devils this season.
Yeah, we should note, just for anybody who is, and we chatted to a number of fans at the playoff final weekend at the end of the season, and we know there's a range of our listeners who listen to our podcast regularly who had said to us, actually, we're only really new to ice hockey in the UK or ice hockey in general, so this is maybe their first season within ice hockey. So for anybody who is listening, who was their first season, just to kind of put it in context, Pete Russell, if you don't already know, Pete Russell was also a coach previously in the Elite League, both for Milton Keynes as well as I think one season with Glasgow as well as head coach of the Clan, before he did move to Germany. So he isn't a stranger to Elite League ice hockey as a top coach in the Elite League. So just to kind of put that in place as well, because we didn't mention that. John, talking of the Glasgow Clan, obviously there's been big changes there since our last recording.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. Was the sale, was that finalised before the last recording? Nope.
Nope.
So essentially, you've now got a Glasgow team owned by some guys in Dublin. So here's fingers crossed for the new Dublin team whenever this franchise finally moves out of the shopping centre, whenever Dublin gets its new ice rink that's been promised for what feels like 20 years. So new owners. Can't exactly remember what they're called, don't really care. At this point, all I know is that they used to be the owners of Premier Sports and Free Sports until they sold that all off to Viaplay a couple of years ago. Bigger piece of news, though, is the fact that the new owner has wasted absolutely no time in making moves behind the bench. Obviously, this was something that we knew was coming. An absolute debacle of a season from an ownership perspective and from a coaching and playing perspective for Glasgow. So we now have a new head coach, and not just a new head coach, but a new head of hockey operations as well, as Jason Morgan will step up, or step behind the bench, if you like, for the Glasgow Clan. He's a St John's, Newfoundland native, having previously coached in Germany, Denmark, Hungary and Romania. He's coached for a team that the Giants fans will know quite well, in the Aalborg Pirates, as well, in his coaching history, and took part in the inaugural CHL campaign. Again, the CHL, something that we're going to talk about soon. So this is a guy with kudos. He's got some coaching chops behind him. We wait to see if the curse of the incumbent foreign coach follows on with Jason, how he does, but I think we wish him luck, and I hope he come no higher than second.
Yeah, just to confirm, the new owner for the Glasgow Clan is for reference sake is a guy called Michael O'Rourke, and as you mentioned, he is from Dublin. The team there, I suppose, the company that he runs, I suppose, is from Dublin.
Here. Just speaking of having a new owner, what do you think that meeting was like at the Elite League meeting for the first time that we've actually had, 10 people round the table instead of 9?
9 and a puppet.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's true.
Saying things in a note that were passed across the table.
Yeah, very true. Dave, one more thing before we move on to just general, signings, comes and goings. Obviously, Morgan, not only has he had obviously the coaching career that he's had, obviously as John has mentioned, obviously with Aalborg Pirates and CHL action and different variations of different leagues and stuff that he's coached in, but also in his playing career, he's notched up. He's had a playing career in the NHL, Los Angeles Kings, Calgary Flames, Chicago Blackhawks, and also your own Minnesota Wild.
Yeah, he played 4 games for the Wilds and did nothing. But he did play. He did really well for the Houston Aeros, to be fair. When they had an AHL team, seems to be a fairly competent AHL level player, which is fantastic. He's went and used that experience and taken it elsewhere. He seems to have had a bit more luck not at a higher level, probably at the same level as a coach. But having so many leagues under his belt and having all those coaches that he's played with and people that are probably he's played hockey with are now coaching, that's just a big black book of people that he can phone to get players. If it looks like it should work, it probably will. But Marty, am I right in saying, did we not play against him in the inaugural CHL?
I feel like we did.
I was thinking as well.
Yeah, I feel like we
it's
did.
been winding me up since he got, because I recognised the name and I didn't recognise him from as a lot. But yeah, I don't have to double check that. I'll have a look there.
Do you know what my favourite part of the announcement is? He says that he's heard great things about the clan and the city of Glasgow. Good luck, mate. You're going to need a bus to get into Glasgow from where you're going to be working. Sorry, mate.
It's, well, as you mentioned, John, I mean, it's at least as long as, even for this year, at least, the Glasgow Clan, next year they'll transfer over to the Dublin Clan, which will be an interesting take. So we'll see how things move forward well, as you say, again, come second, that's all we want, is for them to come second next year at the very least, because we don't want to get any higher than that. But one thing I will say is I do genuinely hope, and I genuinely mean this, I hope that the clan just kind of find a bit more stability this year. And I hope, and I genuinely mean that. I just hope that they're not plagued by the same just difficulties that they had last year. We all know that they had those difficulties with, ice time at the start of the season, the whole issue with around the purchasing of the ice rink and everything else. So all of that at the start of the season, and then everything else that happened after that with Malky.
Hopefully, the big thing I'm looking for them is I want to see them. I think we all agree. We all thought when the clan were coming on board, like they as much as they're not in Glasgow, they are still in a fairly good area for a team. They're in
a good area for a burger.
Yeah. But they pull the crowds in, and we've seen them hire some fantastic teams, but it just never came to fruition. I want to see them sort of step out of that shadow and show what they can do. There's no reason why Glasgow hasn't done the Flames and taken a run for the league. Like, there's been nothing stopping them. They've had the talent, like, so hopefully we'll see some changes.
And I agree with you, and I mean, love them or hate them, and I know there's quite a fierce rivalry that's now been built up over the years between Clan fans and Giants fans. But genuinely, the Clan fans, they do bring an atmosphere. They do.
I thought you were going to say there was a rivalry between Clan fans and the people shopping in Primark next door.
It really annoys you that's in a shopping centre.
It really does. Just wait until I go to Guildford. I bet that place is going to really piss me off too.
Why? Because you can go for a swim before you go and watch the game. You mean?
Exactly. Like Fife, you can break your leg outside trying to get your car.
And it's funny because we will be talking about that Guildford Flames exact issue later on when we talk about interesting developments with CHL.
Well, shall we just go straight into that then?
No. Let's stick with it. Well, obviously, we've talked about head coaches, we've talked about signings, we've talked about changes within the league. So let's talk quickly about the signings and stuff that's been happening around the league, if that's okay, guys. Before we move on to that, I want to have a quick look because obviously we talked about the fact that the import limits have increased. We've talked about the changes to the GMs and everything else, and we've talked about obviously movement and comings and goings. One thing we should mention as well, which we didn't talk about, it's worth obviously talking about because we haven't talked about it since it happened, and as is first recording since then, is we know after the end of the run of the league, even before the league run ended, Dundee announced the departure, their parting ways with with Mason, Jeff Mason, and over the last month or so, the Belfast Giants announced that Jeff Mason has been hired as a, what did they call him? What is his official
coach?
Associate coach. What is meant by associate coach?
Means he's higher than George. Means he's technically higher than George and
Stewie.
Rob.
Yeah.
So technically, that's how that tier works as far as I know. It goes head coach, associate coach, and then assistant coaches.
Obviously, with him coming in from the Stars, though, let's talk about that change. That obviously he came in from the Stars. We don't really fully know. I'd say the associate coach thing. Yes, as you say, maybe it's a step up higher than that, but just below Kiefer. It's an interesting. I don't know, but do we think that obviously that move has also brought in one of the new signings for the Belfast Giants in the form of Elijah Barriga?
Absolutely, 100%. And this was the funny thing. I threw a sort of throwaway comment on Twitter after Baraga was signed, and just said I love the fact that the Giants take the diamonds in the rough and show them what it can be like being in a team like the Belfast Giants. And some people tried to jump down my throat online saying, "How is a point per game a diamond in the rough?" And someone else chimed in about how good Besko had been before his first injury when he was playing in Europe, and then went to Edinburgh in his first sort of time back and ended up being either 9th or 10th place goalie before he came to us and started winning championships. You just proved my point, all of you. The fact is, these are good players playing in bad teams with... okay, I can't really say bad coaching because we've now got Jeff with us. But that team in Dundee wasn't Jeff's, and I've made that point plenty of times on the podcast, and I've made it to a lot of Stars fans when I've been over in Dundee watching games. The fact that he wasn't given another season, I think, is criminal. The fact he wasn't given the chance to build his own team, to build potentially his own success with that franchise, is absolutely criminal from the Dundee Stars. And I'm quite happy to see him back with us because he has coaching chops, and what he's going to be able to do with a team that Steve and Adam are going to build and put together in Belfast is going to be fantastic. And having someone, say Kiefer had to go away, say Kiefer was kept away for some reason, having someone like Jeff who can step up and run that bench, it's absolutely fantastic. I'll take it every day of the week. I'd rather have him in Belfast than have any other team have him as a head coach. So thank you very much, Dundee. But yeah, all the people who tried to jump down my throat about Elijah Baraga coming to Belfast from Dundee, we'll see in 12 months, won't we? And then you can suck it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, fair enough. Let's stick, because we are talking about the Belfast Giants. Let's stick with them. And before we move on to other teams, have a look. We've obviously talked about one new signing to the Belfast Giants, which is Baraga coming from Dundee. Dave, before we talk about returning players, well, let's talk about one other new in inverted commas, new returning player, shall we say? This came as a bit of I think of a surprise response, not only our surprise signing, not only to become a bit of a surprise signing, but I think it also came as a bit of a surprise reaction, shall we say, online for just how people reacted to this signing. Obviously, Davy Phillips leaving the Sheffield Steelers and returning to Belfast Giants.
Like, I was very shocked. Like, Davy's one of those players that you hate. I hated watching him play anywhere else because he's a freaking pain in the hole. But if you have him on your team, fucking fantastic. A bit like Shane Johnson back in his day. You know, you hated, like, whenever he played for Sheffield for that one season, you were like crying. You know, it was like, what the hell? But having Davy back, yes, okay, he's not going to put up big numbers, but he's just a pain in the hole and gets in the road. He stops goals. You know, that's what he does. And he does it well, in my opinion. Yes, he's getting a wee bit long in the tooth, but so.
I think the concerns that were coming out online were about his penalty minutes. I think it kind of goes hand in hand with the fact that, yes, he is one of the elder statesmen of the league now. He's one of the elder statesmen Brits of the league now. And whether he's compensating for potentially, now don't hold this on me, potentially a lack of pace when he's on the back check. And
his penalty minutes dropped this year. So last year with Sheffield, he went down to 20 minutes this year. So like, you can't really go wrong with it. Like,
I think the question had been, were they big penalties? Were they costly penalties? Look, I said it on the chat. It's like, if the Giants are gonna do this, let's just go balls out. Just sign Kevin again.
Yeah.
Let's have them back. We all know the song. Let's sing that song again.
I mean, I suppose it came as a bit of a surprise because obviously I don't think nobody was expecting Davy to be leaving the Sheffield for whatever reason. Obviously, this has happened. I don't know.
I think the other one was the shock. The shock from Belfast was we didn't expect not only Davy to be signing for Belfast, but for that to be the first signing of the off season for the Belfast Giants. That, I think, is what rattled some people because obviously people were waiting with bated breath for another announcement, which did come in the shape of Tyler Beskorowany. Spoiler, yes, but still. Spoiler from like a week and a half ago. But that I think is what rattled a few people, is that this is the first signing. It's a Brit defenseman, an older Brit defenseman as well, which I'm not saying older disparagingly. What I should have said there was veteran. And I think he will probably, I'd be surprised if he doesn't wear the A this season coming as well.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Like, I do think he's definitely as a utility player is maybe the best way to put it. You know, he's a real pain in the hole. But if you did you anybody see the interview with Kitchie?
No, unfortunately, I haven't watched it yet. No.
So he talked about his previous seasons with the Giants, and then him going to the AHL. That year that he was going to the AHL, he had signed a 4-year deal to stay with the Giants, and the Giants let him step away to go to the AHL. Like, who the fuck was going to stop him? You know, pardon my French, I don't know what's coming out of it, but like the Giants let him go, and he went and done his thing, and then he did come back for a couple of years. So he's obviously just went where the money's been right. If you know what I mean? Which wouldn't be bad to anybody. And part of me's wondering, did Sheffield maybe not only up the dough? And we have went, sure, come on, we have a lovely wee time with loads of bars.
I guess what makes me wonder, I suppose, what came to my head was obviously the Giants obviously know that they need to bring in, and you guys have already mentioned it. Davey he's getting on in years, and I don't mean that to sound like, because he's still quite, he's still young, he's younger than us, but he's getting on in years in terms of he's getting on in years in terms of hockey players, and he's now become pretty much a veteran for the league. Like, he is, like, there's no other way to describe him. He is a veteran in this league. He's been around for long enough that he could be called a veteran. And I suppose what the Giants need to make sure they're doing is they need to be bringing in that depth in defense, because we had that depth in defense. We had some old veteran-y type players who've had long careers, who have now stepped away for this year in retirement and everything else, and moved away for whatever reasons. We haven't heard about certain other players, which I feel like we may not have heard anything yet about Garside. We don't know what's going to happen there. We know obviously Garside was a two-way player forward and backwards. We don't know what's happening with Garside this year coming in. That could still be announced. Maybe it's not going to be announced. We don't know. But I guess for the Giants, they need to be bringing in some vets as well to kind of put a bit more experience in that line, because we do tend to bring in a lot of younger players coming through those development ways from the college through the NCAA program that we have, and we tend to bring in quite a lot of those. So we need to have, I suppose, balance it up. And Davey, people argued and people are saying like Davey has had questionable seasons, the last 2 seasons or whatever it is, but he had a phenomenal GB tournament this year, and I know people are saying, well, it was only a tournament. He still had a great tournament.
He's playing for a questionable team.
That's it. Well, to be fair, like,
he needs the right coach.
Yeah, I was about to say, like,
do you know the most interesting thing, just scrolling through the signings and things, is looking at the signings that the Giants have made. Signed 3 Brits already. Yeah.
And we've talked about one already. Obviously, that's Sean Norris coming in now this year and playing, I believe, is a full contract and not a 2-way contract. I believe it's a full contract this year, which is great, which is fantastic. So
that's
we
it.
have a number 14
jersey. Release the jersey so I can buy it.
Yes, exactly. And we also have Ben Lake returning as the other Brit. And then the last player, obviously, we already talked about Tyler Beskorowany being the signing that everybody was waiting for, and it was announced, and everybody went, I know I did. I know my response as a GIF on our group chat was said it all. I'm glad he's back. I do owe the man a pair of shoes. So if someone can find out what size he wears, I will buy him a new pair of shoes. And I do actually mean that. I will buy him a new pair of shoes.
Big shoes.
I know he wears Vans because they were nice. They were a nice pair of Vans that he was wearing on the day. So just someone get me the size, and I will genuinely buy him a pair of shoes. I
want to make sure as well that we don't forget Matt McLeod as well.
Yes,
extending as well, just in the middle of that. Another fantastic young player. Did really, really well last season, and like, I know it's not a full team at all. We've got a lot of names to come. Baraga's a bit of an unknown quantity for Belfast fans, because we've only seen him, about 18 times that they played in Belfast last season. But I love the little core that we seem to have, and I'm loving the Brit core that we've got. I will reserve my judgment on Davy Phillips. I'm sorry to say it. Like, I think I'm more in that camp of it was more of a shock and it's a surprise. I'm looking forward to him having an absolute standout season, but I will reserve judgment.
Guys, let's move on to a couple of other bits.
I'd love to see Garside back. He does. Like, I think it would be the missing piece. If that makes sense. If you're bringing Davy back, then why wouldn't you bring Garside back?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I still think Gary's got legs in him to continue playing, and I think he should, as long as he can.
I know it's a departing player, we don't normally talk about it, but can I just give one quick second for the departure of Steve Orey, which I don't think got the fanfare that it should have. Steve Orey was quietly fantastic for the Belfast Giants last season, and I want to make one massive point. He scored the Grand Slam goal.
Yeah.
It wasn't the last goal of that game, but he scored the game-winning goal. And also, chatting to him on the ice in Nottingham, nicest guy. Really nice guy.
I was, to be honest, whenever they announced that he was leaving, he's departing the team, when he moved up into that first line in the last part of this, in the end part of the season, he was just, consistent, banging goals in, and he was just, I was loving watching him play. And I am disappointed. I'm sad to see him go. And there's a couple of other players who have been announced as not returning. We're not going to get into a lot of it, but there's a couple of other players who I'm just devastated to see. There's two other players who I'm just devastated to see leaving this, leaving Sam Rupp. Just again, a player quality is so good this season, and seeing him go, if there's reasons there, and it's just sad to see it happen. And Grant Cooper, I know he only came in as a cover towards the end of the season, but he had a phenomenal part with us. Him leaving and retiring, right choice for him. But again, I was hoping to maybe see him for a full season, but hey, that's how it works. Guys, let's just have a quick look at just some of the other just movement around the league, and some other signings. A couple of other teams, a lot of, as usual at this point of the season, at the start of June, not a lot. Some teams are still not really announcing too many signings, and some haven't announced anything at all. 5 flyers. There's been absolutely no communication whatsoever.
Give me a minute. I want to talk about the Flyers.
We'll go with that after. Hang on, we'll move on to this first. Coventry Blaze is the only other team I would say at the moment who have been making announcements left, right, and centre in relation to signings coming and goings. Coventry have announced as of today, I think was the announcement, that they have signed Taron Cousin from Cardiff Devils. Effectively, he's left and is moving to the Coventry Blaze for the next season as their head goaltender, and they're also bringing in a backup netminder in the form of Nolan Kent, or maybe it's going to be a 1-2 tandem from the University of Alaska, coming into Coventry Blaze, and he's going to come in as an alt goaltender as well. So don't know if they'll do a tandem, don't know if it's a 1-2 type situation there.
Their biggest 2 signings that I'm seeing so far is the absolute robbery of Jack Hopkins and Archie Hazeldine from Nottingham.
Yes.
That's 2 good young Brits that they have poached them, and that's a good start signing wise for them. I mean, Cozen had a ropey season in Cardiff, let's be totally honest, but he is a standout goalie, and I think it just comes down to the season that Cardiff had and why he didn't have more success. Also the fact that you've got Bounds sitting in Cardiff and putting Bounds in nets as a crowd pleaser. If you don't put Bounds in nets, then you get criticised for it, and I think that's a major problem that that team has in particular, especially when it comes to Boundsy. So they could have a brilliant year. I mean, Coventry have consistently been that middle top end of the table, and they just need a breakout season, and they could win it all quite easily, the same way that we have.
I mean, obviously, we're talking about the Cardiff Devils there, John. Just mentioning Boundsy. Obviously, Boundsy hasn't been officially announced as returning to the Cardiff Devils yet. Let's be honest, it's bound to happen. It's gonna that news is gonna come.
He's gonna do one more season at least. He's not gonna retire this season because GB are back top flight, so he's gonna want to stay to do that again.
I mean, so far Cardiff Devils have announced obviously the signing of Joey Martin, I think, which again, not a surprise. I think it's like his 8th season or something in Cardiff. That's not a surprise. And I think they've only announced one other signing, I think maybe yesterday, and that was a forward from the Huskies, Castle Huskies, in America or Canada, Jamie Arnold. He's a forward, and that's the only other signing the Cardiff Devils have announced. But coming back to something you mentioned, and it's a non-elite league team, I just want to highlight this as a non-elite league team. I just want to talk about quickly. You talked about sniping, and you talked about poaching players and just stealing players, shall we say. You talked about how the Coventry Blaze made a great move by taking those 2 young Brits and taking them on board. Let's talk about the fact that the announcement was made that Craig Peacock obviously was retiring in Glasgow Clan, and then Craig Peacock was announced as the new head coach for the Solway Sharks, who have moved up into the NIHL officially for the next season. But as part of that, he has swooped in and taken, I think, is a great player, and I was really surprised to see him moving over to Solway, and that is in the form of Barry McKenzie from Fife Flyers. I think
this is exactly what I want to talk about. The fact that Solway have stepped up, and the fact that Craig has gone across there. Fife are in real difficulties, I think, when it comes to Brit signings. Barry McKenzie is an outstanding player. He's one of those ones, along with the likes of, I'm putting imports in this, the likes of Shane Owen, players who should not be playing for a franchise like Fife, because they are better than that. And the fact that we're now seeing. You just have to look down the list of transfers and signings and look at what that team moving up a league is doing to the Elite League, and especially to the Brit pool.
Yeah.
When you've got increased imports and reduced Brit spaces, there is tighter fighting is going to go on, but the problem is going to come where you've got teams like Fife, Dundee, and to a lesser extent Glasgow, who are really reliant on the Scottish pool of local talent, and Solway are now a massive, massive draw because they are a team who can go into the NHL and can win it all. They had a fantastic season last season where they were in the league that they were in. I think they won at least one, maybe two trophies, and that was while even Kel Beattie was overplaying with them as well. Kel has stepped up into a full-time contract now in the NHL.
I was just about to say that, John. I was about to say that we can't not talk about the fact that the other name that he has signed and that was announced this week was Kel Beattie. Now, has it been confirmed that Kel Beattie is moving over full-time contract and it's not going to be a two-way contract anymore with the Belfast?
No, I think it's full-time.
Okay.
It's been announced.
Right.
Yep. So
okay.
This is a full. I think it's Kel's first full-time pro contract.
Okay.
Or semi-pro, whatever that league is. But I would still love to see him on a two-way. But considering the way that league now looks to be positioned and how competitive that league is, I think the availability will start to become an issue about doing those sort of two ways, especially for Belfast. I think that's potentially going to be a bit of a problem for us with those, especially with the likes of Solway, who we've done a lot of those two ways with, because geographically it's really easy to get a guy from Solway over to Belfast.
Yep.
But if they're competing for silverware in a higher league, they're not going to want to lose their top end guys to the Elite League. That's just the reality of it.
And that's it. Obviously when we come back, we'll probably do another recording next month, and obviously there'll be more signings and more comings and goings, but I think that's the majority of the big ones so far.
Probably from 9 teams, Fife will still be waiting to hear who's going to coach them.
But
you know what though? You can still get your season tickets, by the way, guys. What a stupid PR process they're going through at the minute. They are not looking at. You just have to go into the comments. They put in out one or two of these posts about who, like, this person has renewed their season ticket because I like going to hockey. That's not a reason. That's not a reason for other people to buy season tickets, Fife. I mean, in the comments, everyone is complaining. Who's our coach? Have you got any players signed? Are you going to give us anything at all? Why would I part with £400 for a season ticket for a team that came pretty much bottom of the league after a team, except for Dundee, and were leapfrogged into playoffs by a team who basically started 2 months after us? It's a joke, and it's more and more of the same from Fife, and it's shocking. And if what I heard back at playoffs and what I keep hearing at the minute from a couple of people is true, Fife fans are not going to be happy with what they're going to hear.
I mean, yeah, I heard there's a lot of mumblings around that the fact that, a lot of fans just feel that Fife just has no aspiration right now. They have no real drive, and the fact that they're staying quiet, there's been no communication. But we know Fife year in, year out, always gets to this point, the start of the off season, and you hear absolutely nothing whatsoever, and that's always the way. And
after the back end of the season, where they say it's going to be all different this season, guys.
Yeah, I mean, guys, before we move on to our next two stories, is there anything I'm missing out in terms of signings that anybody else wanted to talk about? Anything hit anybody's attention that I haven't mentioned? No? Okay. Then the other two stories that we're going to move on to is the Elite League teams taking part in European competitions next season. Let's start with obviously the Belfast Giants having won the Grand Slam, having won the Grand Slam, winning the league basically guaranteed them a spot in the Champions Hockey League.
Marty, remind me, did we take that? Did we take up our CHL spot?
We did take up our CHL spot. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
We took up our we have our I suppose the draw was done last week. John, you have a bit more detail on it. Do you want to take us through that, and then I'll take us on to the Continental Cup fiasco?
Yeah, sure. So the draw was done last week for the CHL for its new format. So essentially what happened was the teams were drawn into four rows or 6 columns or 7 or whatever it was. They were drawn into columns. It was a complicated draw, but actually, when you sit and look at it, it does make sense. So they've changed it now. So it's not that you go straight into knockout competitions or sort of week in, week out competitions, whatever. You go into what they're now calling the regular season to start with. So you play against 6 other teams. You play 3 home games, 3 away games, all against different opposition. So the way it worked was you played, I think, the teams that were to the column on the left of you at home, the column to the right away, or vice versa. Look, don't come at me. I know who. I just have little symbols that tell me the people that were playing here. So that's whatever's happening. We've got the draw. We know what we're doing. I think we had an interview. We've got 2 Austrian opponents and
2 Finland.
2 Finland, 1 Austrian.
2 Finn, 1 Austrian is the away games, with the home games being 1 German. Honestly, I don't know. I just have the symbols there. One of them's Red Bull, so I mean that's bound to be German.
Salzburg.
So that's the one. You'd think I would have had the story up rather than just a little picture that showed me whatever it was. You know where I could have gone? The Belfast Giants website, because they've got a really good thing about who the opponents are. But I'm not going to worry about it. So the opponents are set. I'm just hoping that Adam Keefe did say that he's hoping to arrange the Finnish games as effectively a double header. At which point every Giants fan cheered with delight at the idea of an away European doubleheader, because I know fine rightly I think we'll be there if it goes that way.
I'm hoping. I would definitely like to go to Finland, and I know my good lady wife has said that she is also wanting to go to Finland.
Do you think they've? Do you think they give out media passes?
You could ask. Obviously, we have the Giants took up their place in the CHL. They met all the requirements that was needed as well for the CHL. Obviously, the rink is the right size.
They didn't have a pool beside their rink. You know.
Yes, they don't have a pool.
Our aspirations are also great enough to want to take part.
Well, in saying that, let's look then at the other competition that was up for grabs, because the Giants did win the Grand Slam and won all 3 trophies that were available. The result meant that the second place team in the actual league run was afforded the opportunity to enter the IIHF Continental Cup, and that was in the form of the Guildford Flames. Now, at the playoff weekend, I should mention we were talking to a bunch of Guildford fans in the Weatherspoons down by, I think it was. Which one? The one down by Square. We're talking to a bunch of really nice fans in there. And the one thing that they were really, really excited about over that weekend was the fact that although their team was not going to be there playing that weekend, the big thing was they were hoping that the Giants were going to win the whole thing, because that meant that they were guaranteed an entry into the Continental Cup next year. And the fans were really excited about the idea of taking part in the Continental Cup, because it meant that they could all do what we've enjoyed doing in the past in the Continental Cup and get a weekend away for a tournament. Fantastic tournament. It's usually a great weekend because it is done in such a way that you get to kind of have those games over the Friday, Saturday and Sunday, and it is a fantastic experience, and the fans were really excited about it.
And the biggest thing is you can go away. You don't have to host it.
Let's get into it.
And they were over the moon, and then what happened?
So the Flames, being the Elite League representative for the application to entry for the Continental Cup on the basis of being second place in the league, had made the decision to not enter the competition. The announcement, I suppose the Chief Operating Officer Kirk Humphreys put out a statement that said, "We know this is perhaps one of the most difficult news items we have ever had to pass on to our supporters. As a group, we looked at it from every aspect, including the honour and the prestige that goes with the competition. But there were too many real issues that make the best decision for this club, at least at this time, for where we stand within the Elite League. Among several of those issues, crucially, we are unable to host any portion of the Continental Cup like other Elite League teams have done, because it would need virtual monopoly of spectrum for a Friday, Saturday and Sunday stretch, which is not available to us. This means we cannot play any home games and would likely play 6 games over a pair of 3 games in 3-night stretches, all with long distance European travel. This is not a competition that starts before the season, but for our anticipation entry would be in November and January as part of the already congested 70-ish game schedule. The competition competition would also force us to miss a couple of extra weekends of home league action and shift too many games home and away to what is already usually a busy midweek obligation. This club does aspire to win the Elite League, Cup and playoff titles, none of which we have collected yet, and we are hoping we might be in a window now where that might be possible. If we already had a load of silver in the bank from previous recent seasons, the decision factors are possible to make a difference here, but for the moment we have to keep our eye trained on our domestic success. Joining a fourth competition on long road trips with no home games and the resulting fixture mashup inevitably impacts the rest of the schedule and makes it hard for us to achieve domestic objectives. So while they are saying that they would like to play on it, they just don't feel that they're in a position right now that they have developed strong enough as a team to basically compete in the European.
Do you know what? Saying in the same breath that we're not going to take part in the Continental Cup, but we aspire to win everything in the Elite League, when two of those trophies come with potential automatic entry into two of the biggest European hockey competitions, is an absolute nonsense. If you're not prepared to take up the spots, what are you doing in the Elite League?
I mean, this was one set
for winning.
I mean, this is
exactly.
This is one set of fans who rightly were annoyed, and the response online was as expected. Fans were, I suppose, well, some people could say it was measured, but I don't think it was. So I read, it was a measured response. I don't think it was a measured response. The majority of responses I read were people saying, this is a joke. I can't believe our club has making this decision and taken away the opportunity for our fans and blah, blah, blah. And I understand, it is expense. It is, if they are playing, trying to arrange games, that's fine. Like, whatever the argument is. But that's one set of fans. There's a second set of fans then in the Elite League who are also really angry.
See the Guildford fans. Want to head to Europe with the Giants fans? Come on, we'll go on a wee Europe trip.
But there was a second set of fans then about 2 or 3 days later who then the next day who were also very disappointed because their club also declined the place in the Continental Cup, and that was in the form of the Sheffield Steelers. Following the decision of the Guildford Flames to withdraw from their position in the forthcoming season of the Continental Cup, the Steelers have been afforded the opportunity to enter the competition. Unfortunately, the club have decided against entry to this year's Cup competition after taking into account ice time availability and the schedule ahead in this season's Elite League competition. A club spokesperson said, with additional games to be played in a shorter period of time to fit into the schedule, it would not have been sensible for the club and our playing staff. We understand the Cardiff Devils have taken the opportunity to enter the Continental Cup, and all of the Steelers wish them every success in the competition. So the Sheffield Steelers have also turned down their position, their option to enter into the Continental Cup.
Sheffield tin pot.
Which means, guys,
disgrace.
Which means, guys, effectively the fourth placed team in last season
have been fourth choice.
Fourth choice, but fourth place as well. The fourth place team in the Elite League have been awarded the Continental Cup entry. I mean, Cardiff Devils obviously.
I said that.
Just do the both.
I mean.
Do you know what? I had a discussion on Twitter with Thomas Brownlee about this, because whenever these announcements were coming out from Guildford and Sheffield, and then Cardiff said that they were going to do it, we've already had effectively the CHL have tried to make the format and the qualification difficult enough that it means that the Elite League potentially might not have been one of the Challenger Leagues, and there is absolutely no guarantee that after this season that we will continue to be a Challenger League in the CHL, so we may lose that spot. What these decisions by the Guildford Flames and the Sheffield Steelers does, is gives the IIHF ammunition to look at the Elite League, to look at the teams that are representing that league, and go, well, if you're not going to come to our flagship European competition, why should we be inviting you? Why do we give you automatic entry through your playoff competition? It's a nonsense. So, Do you know what? Actually, you're not invited. So what this league is actually potentially doing is fighting its way out of Europe, kicking and screaming and saying we want to be there, but actually we don't want to be there.
That's a bigger argument.
It's an absolute nonsense about the conversation.
We had a big vote on that
too. True.
But the English didn't like that either.
Sure, it's all right. It's all right. We'll get to like a certain point where everyone will just say no, and eventually Fife are going to be left there going,
We need to represent. That's the only way they're getting into the competition, is everybody else decides to drop out. Guys, I think that is actually officially it for period 1. Am I missing any stories that we haven't included? No.
Nope.
That is obviously, there's been a lot to talk about. Obviously since our last recording, and thank you for listening to that part. And if any of those stories do feel a bit old, I'm sorry, but we did have a lot to talk about. And we really wanted to talk about the whole Continental Cup debacle, I suppose, and that's why we've added it into this period. We do have a few questions, but we will come back to the Elite League because we do have a few questions in our overtime segment, which has been sent in from some of our Twitter followers. So we will be coming back to a few bits and pieces. So we will return to the Elite League later in our show.
Just to say as well to everyone, look, if you do have quite a long commute, well done. You've made it to work. It's an hour in. We're only done one period, so stick with us. You'll probably be listening to this one when you go back to work tomorrow, so just keep with us.
I have said we are on episode 101. This is episode 101, and the 101 actually just probably stands for how many minutes this episode is going to be. So let's see how
we're going to have to go fast at this rate.
Let's see how close you get to that. With that, we will sign off period 1, and we will move into our period 2 of hockey.
And welcome to period 2 of hockey. This is where we'll talk about hockey from the rest of the world. As usual, I have done absolutely no pre-organisation, so I'm going to ask Marty to give us a start.
Yeah, of course. I will start us off. Well, actually, I was gonna say maybe we should get John to start us off with the whole where we are with the Stanley Cup, I suppose.
Yeah, really simple, guys. Who had Vegas and Florida in the Cup final on their bingo card this season? Marty, shut up!
If anybody has that bet has made a clean fortune.
Yeah.
Whoever has bet one of those as champion, it doesn't matter. Someone is sitting, one person, at least one person is sitting with a betting slip that says either Vegas or Florida for champions, and they're just waiting to cash it in.
Yeah.
They need 4 or more games, and they're just waiting to cash that in to make bank.
I mean, I genuinely am shocked. I'm shocked by the fact that it came down to the Knights versus the Panthers. I was not seeing that whatsoever. Did not expect that to be our final at all. I was hoping it was going to be our final as well, but I didn't expect it. But what I will say is the Panthers. I've got to admit that the Panthers have been dominant in this playoff.
They are playing. Well. Yep, they're wildcard too. They were the second wildcard. They were the lowest ranked in the East as well. So my biggest thing is they are playing. Up until this stage, they've been playing with a team who had nothing to prove, and to be honest, I still don't think they've got anything to prove. They lifted the Eastern Conference trophy, and I mean they lifted it.
Yeah.
They skated it round the rink, and do you know what? I'm absolutely here for it. You win a trophy, you get the opportunity to skate that round on the ice for your fans. If I was the Vegas fans, and I'm seeing that trophy put down on the ice, and they all refuse to touch it, you don't get to skate it round. Yeah, fantastic. It's an old hockey adage. That's fantastic. Show the fans the trophy you've just won.
There could be an argument. I suppose the argument will be. I suppose the argument could be that the two teams going into the final, are quite good, evenly matched, and quite in terms of, they've been both dominant in their respective conferences in terms of in terms of these finals. The Golden Knights. Let's look at it. They've won the first round. They won 4-1 against the Winnipeg Jets. In the second round, they were 4-2 against the Edinburgh Oilers, and in the third round in the final in the conference final, they beat Dallas 4-2.
Edmonton, not Edinburgh.
Sorry, Edmonton. Sorry. And then Panthers. If we look at the Panthers, I mean their toughest round is probably that first round against the Boston Bruins, which we did not expect. We thought Boston probably would take that round. I don't think anybody would have. I don't think I'm talking out turn and saying everybody kind of expected Boston, given how dominant they were this season. We thought they would kind of go through and we'd be seeing a Boston versus Toronto Maple Leafs second round, but that's not what happened. Obviously, we seen a Panthers then taking on the Toronto Maple Leafs in that second round and annihilating pretty much nearly 4-1, winning it 4-1, and in that conference final against Carolina Hurricanes, completely dominating 4-0. I mean, it's
the only sweep of this season's or this year's postseason, I think, is that sweep. I don't think there has been a sweep in any series except for that one.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The most tantalising thing going into this now is looking at the series from the regular season, and obviously they're on separate conferences, so they only meet each other 4 times. They're 1-1.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, or sorry, they only meet each other twice. Sorry, and they're 1-1.
Yep.
So that's tasty. I mean, this is good, and I think it's also, no matter, I think even from the last stage, from the was it from the second round? It must have been from the third round, the semi-final or the conference finals maybe. The champion, the Stanley Cup champion, would be a new champion for the first time in, is it 9 years?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I mean that's epic. That's going to be fantastic, and either one of these is great. It's either a Cinderella story from the Panthers, or it's the Golden Knights making good on what should have been in their opening season.
I was thinking exactly that. I mean, obviously the Golden Knights have been there recently, and they were obviously pitted to the post just slightly in that inaugural season. They had such a phenomenal season in that inaugural season, and I think you're right, for the Vegas in such a young history of the team to be able to lift the trophy this season and be that the Stanley Cup would just be historic. I suppose it'd be a great way to write their history, starting really early.
If you had to call it, and you wanted one to lift it, who is it, Marty?
I want Vegas to lift it.
Dave?
Panthers. Want to see Eric Stahl lift another Stanley Cup for another team.
I just want to see Tkachuk lift it, because he was lights out in that conference final series. Absolutely unbelievable. Two OT goals, and we also had that, was it 5 or 7 OT game in the conference final as well?
If you look at Eric Stahl, he is the antithesis of this Panthers team. This is a guy that, when he was playing for Montreal, got sent to the AHL. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Or sorry, he was playing for the Wild. Montreal. Yes, sorry, I was right. He got sent to the AHL, and I think he didn't only played like 4 games that season, and then bang, 72 games played this year for the Panthers. Like that's bonkers. And I just think he deserves it.
Obviously the big argument is around, obviously the goaltending for both teams has been phenomenal this season, and I do have a soft spot for the Panthers goaltender Bobrovsky. And I do have a soft spot for him, and that's the only reason I would really want to see the Panthers. But I think I would probably prefer Vegas to lift it, just because I just think that's for story purposes. I just think it's a great story, and I think Vegas should lift it. But yeah, we'll see. When it comes to our next podcast, we will know who won it. So hopefully, we'll see either way. Dave, are you okay for me to continue on with moving on to the stories now? Great. Obviously, it ties in quite well. Obviously, mine with the obviously the story of the playoffs and how we got to the playoff final, with the 2 teams that have got there. Obviously, talking from a Toronto Maple Leafs fan, obviously the Toronto Maple Leafs getting put out in the second round. So much hope this year in relation to how that all developed, and then just get a complete humping in that second round. And as a response, the Shanahan announced quite shortly, I think it was the day after, the Toronto Maple Leafs got put out, that Kyle Dubas was let go as the GM for the Maple Leafs, and replacing Dubas now has been officially announced. Treliving has been hired as the general manager of the Maple Leafs moving forward, who arrives after 9 seasons with the Calgary Flames. I mean that I think that in its own, I mean that story in general about Dubas being kicked straight away. I mean that was I was shocked by it. I mean, was that the right
that's a big
call?
thing as well, Marty. That's what I meant to ask you. Like, how do you feel as a Leafs fan? I know how I feel looking on from the outside with no skin in the game. I know how that looks to me, but as a Leafs fan, how do you feel about Dubas being shown the door?
I mean, I just feel like, I felt, yeah, I mean, there's arguments being made about, whether or not it was the right person that had to take responsibility for what happened there. There was an argument around, it should have been the GM that took responsibility for the fact that they were put out in the second round, and it's taken them too long to get to the point where the Toronto Maple Leafs want to be at this point. The Toronto Maple Leafs kind of made it clear that they kind of were hoping under Dubas that they would have potentially got to at least a conference final by this stage, and obviously that hasn't happened. In the last 3 years or whatever, we've been put out after the first round, and obviously this year getting into the second round and everything else. And again, I think they were kind of like, well, Dubas has to go because there's not enough effort being put in. It's not being right.
They say...
Some people are arguing, and again, this is controversial to say, but some people are arguing, well, should it have been him or should it actually have been Kiefer?
Well, that was my next
the other Kiefer. Should it actually have been the other
successful Kiefer?
The less successful Kiefer? Should it have been Sheldon, who actually was actually moved on? And again,
well, that's another question as well, Marty. Is you've obviously got a new GM now, who was announced, I think, yesterday.
Yes.
Is, in your opinion, is Sheldon secure?
I think he is. I think Sheldon is protected by Shanahan in some ways. And
I think Shanahan being overarching with both the Marlies and the Leafs, do you think that gives Sheldon a bit of security, maybe 2 more seasons?
I think he's protected. I genuinely think he's protected that way. And I genuinely, I'll watch this come back and bite me when it comes to our next podcast, but I think he's protected, and I don't think there'll be any change in the relation to the coaching for that. I know there is coaching change.
I'll keep an eye on Twitter while we're recording to make sure he doesn't get fired in the meantime.
I know there is a coaching change for the Leafs in the form of, I hope if you don't mind, I know I'm moving on to another story, but Spencer Carberry, who was the assistant coach in the Maple Leafs for the last 2 seasons under Sheldon Keefe, has been announced as of, I think, yesterday or was it Tuesday possibly, he was announced as the head coach for the Washington Capitals. He's obviously moving over there after, I suppose he was with the Capitals American Hockey League affiliate team Hershey for 3 seasons before joining the Toronto Maple Leafs. So there's kind of this kind of thing of like, well, okay, he's been in the NHL, he's under under Sheldon Keefe, he's had assistant coach responsibilities and experience. Now it's time for him to move up in the NHL and take over at the Washington Capitals after being in the AHL affiliate. So he is moving up there and he's taken over there. So there is a slight change, obviously, to the coaching.
But he's not the only one who's been poached from Toronto, because Kyle Dubas essentially was put out on his arse by the Maple Leafs, but it hasn't held him back. And just as of today, was announced as the new president of hockey for Pittsburgh.
Yes, correct. That was, as you say, John, that was announced today. I think that was literally just before we come on air to record. I think that was announced, because before that there was still a bit of an argument around, he was there something about he turned down...
I think he turned down their first offer because, well, to be fair, he's going to be travelling. He's going to have to bring his family and everything from Toronto where they're all settled. They have been for the last 9 years. And to be honest, he's a businessman as well, so you never take the first offer when you're in business. So, of course, he was going to string them on, but he's put pen to paper and he's signed as the president of hockey operations, I think is his title, for the Pittsburgh Penguins.
So obviously one of our regular listeners and contributors to the show, who we'll talk about again later in the podcast, Mark, will be interesting to see what his response is to this announcement of Kyle Dubas coming in there to take over the Penguins and move them forward from a business point of view. So that'll be an interesting one as well. What I should mention as well is obviously the announcement of the Washington Capitals making their move and signing Carberry as their coach for the next season. That does leave 4 teams within the NHL still on the hunt for a replacement coach. We know that the Ducks, the Blue Jackets, Flames, and the Rangers are all in talks with, are still all out there looking for.
They're out looking, but I do know that there was a news piece put out that the just relieved Hines from, or previously of Nashville, the Rangers have seek permission, because he's technically still under contract with Nashville until he signs elsewhere or moves out of the league. They've asked for permission to speak to him, so we could see Hines moving into New York, into the MSG fairly soon. I think that's probably nailed in, if I'm totally honest, is that he'll move into New York. And that kind of maybe bleeds well on, if you don't mind me chatting then a little bit about the Preds, because the Preds have made moves to name a new head coach. Obviously, Hines was removed as Barry Trotz. The Barry Trotz era in Nashville has begun as he takes over the reins from David Poile as only the second GM in Preds history. And Andrew Brunette has been named as the fourth coach in Preds franchise history. What I didn't realise is that Brunette has some history with both Poile and with Trotz, who have both either drafted him or have coached him at lower or NHL levels, which is really interesting. So actually, Barry Trotz has known Brunette for something like 20 years. So might stink a little bit of nepotism, but I'm encouraged to see the Trotz era in Nashville and see how that goes.
Does anybody else, every time they hear the word trot, giggle the way I do? I'm really sorry, I'm childish.
Listen, if there's ever been a man who looks the way his name sounds, it's Barry Trotz. I mean, let's be totally honest. But if anyone was going to take over, given I'm going to call him Barry from now, all right, just to stop you giggling. Given how enormous Barry was for the Predators as a head coach and part of the organisation previously, the fact that he's now stepped in to the shoes of David Poile, who's essentially been the rudder behind that team for so long. Yes, it's been with limited success, but it's always been a team on the build. We had that run all the way to the final a few years ago, which was fantastic, but we want to get back there, and fingers crossed this is the start of it, and this is where we're going to go. We'll call it a rebuild.
Can I just confirm the one thing before we move on from the Trotz story? Is Trotz a slang only in British terms, or is that something that's universal across the whole world? Because if you're listening in, we know we have a lot of people who listen into our podcast from over in the States and Canada. So they're probably like, why are they laughing? Hopefully, if you don't know, maybe go on Urban Dictionary and just search for the phrase trots to see what we're talking about. In case you're wondering, why are they laughing at that? Yeah, maybe
listen,
go on have
the Preds have known that they were going to have the trots like since the middle of last season. All right, so we're going forward. We're the team with the trots. All right.
Oh, fun times. Dave, I have one last story. Just obviously before we finish off this period, and that's obviously the story. Sorry,
the one we've all been waiting for, isn't it?
It's the one we've all been waiting for. It's the one that we're coming back to after talking about it in previous episodes, and that is, as of last week, there was I suppose the official development, shall we say, within Tempe, and the Coyotes, I suppose. Let me restart this. The Arizona Coyotes had planned to build a new arena in Tempe, as we had discussed in previous podcasts, and it was to go to a vote, to almost like a residence vote type thing, and it was a special commission put together that was going to be an emergency vote that was being put together to see where this development was going to go, whether or not they were going to get the permission to build the 16,000 seat arena and an entertainment district as part of the whole thing around in a certain area within the area of Tempe. It was a 46-acre piece of land, not too far from the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and I think there was a lot of discussions around, whether or not that was going to be a whole thing around, whether that was feasible with sound and noise and stuff, because obviously they're going to have housing and everything else. Officially, the Coyotes needed to have I suppose approval with the majority, obviously, of the vote. And unfortunately, the vote which was held last Tuesday, the ballot seemed that it was that the Toronto Coyotes have lost that vote, meaning that they have not been given the go ahead to continue with the development of this site. Obviously, this is a massive impact in relation to the future developments of the Coyotes in terms of how they're hoping to kind of develop going forward. Obviously, at the moment, they are temporary housing within the Mullet Arena. I mean, guys, we talked about this briefly when we met up there last week, the week before. John, you were over in Belfast visiting, and we got a chance to catch up, and we were chatting a bit about this story. And I know Aaron was with us that night. We were chatting about it. I mean, we joke around about it. What is it that that they have over Bateman? In terms of the fact that there's a continuation of like support coming for the Coyotes. I mean, this is just another difficult situation in terms of like how do they overcome this now moving forward.
It's just
crazy.
nonsense. They have to leave. They have to leave Arizona. It's a nonsense. Gary Bettman should step down immediately because he has been the architect of all of this. I said to you guys that it turned out that the NHL, the team, and a lot of the major backers were so confident about this that Gary Bettman was ready to roll himself out on a bit of a victory lap around Arizona. And when it came back as a no, he went very, very quiet. He disappeared. He didn't make the appearances that he was supposed to make. This was supposed to be his victory lap, that he secured hockey in Arizona. It's a dead horse. Stop flogging it. It's just done. This franchise has to leave Arizona. It just has to get out completely. It's just a nonsense. They've already said, and what blows my mind is they've said that they're going to continue playing in Mullet this coming season.
I mean,
they've already said it. It's just.
I mean, let's put it in context. The Coyotes did sign a contract or had committed to playing in the Mullet Arena for at least 3 seasons with an option for a 4th season after that, because the whole idea was that they would need that length of time in order to build this new state-of-the-art arena and entertainment complex in the district and everything else. Obviously, that's not happening. Dave, the talk is that, that there has been discussion around if there was a rejection from the Tempe, the around this whole project, if it was going to fail. There has been speculation that because they need to have eventually have an NHL size facility, and because there's no potential to have that anywhere within the state, that they maybe are looking at, and the speculation has been that they'll potentially move to Houston. What's your thoughts?
I would love to see hockey back in Houston. It's it's a market that works. As far as I'm aware, every time that it's moved, it's been a franchise move rather than a foreclosure or anything. And the sport's changed significantly. It is a bigger sport. It's more of a entertainment thing now. So I think Houston would be a good market. The thing I've seen, which I have to say, is weird. Do any of you just follow the Coyotes on Twitter?
No.
They are proper doubling down on this, like, oh well, we're just going to play in the Mullet Arena. That's crazy.
It's because it's an ownership and a backroom team that are completely blind to the oblivious. They were completely blind 2 years ago whenever they said they were going to leave their arena and move to a university rink, a 5,000-seater arena, which is smaller than about half of the Elite League stadiums. We've spent 3 years ripping into this team about this. It's just a complete joke. There are so many places ready. I know Houston is probably the out-and-out favourite, but some of the other ones that have been talked about, Atlanta apparently is ready to have a franchise back again after the failure of the Thrashers. I think that was
Kansas City apparently.
That's an unlikely one, I think, given that was an area problem. That was a similar issue to what I think has been happening in Arizona. Not around building, I think just around fan numbers. My constant go back to is I think Canada needs another franchise. Quebec is crying out for a franchise again. They deserve it. They should have it. Kansas City apparently is another high up one. They're crying for it. But Salt Lake apparently is probably second behind Houston. And apparently, the Utah Jazz owner has met with Gary Bettman in the past year because the Jazz owner owns the arena. So he's prepared to make the alterations for a franchise. And apparently that would be a roughly 14,000 seater arena for hockey. So, I mean, look, there's plenty of options ready. There are so many places ready to seat more than 5,000 NHL fans. It's just a joke that team is still there.
I'm sure we'll still be talking about this topic when it comes to the start of the season again. I'm sure it's not going to go away anytime soon. So we'll wait and see.
There'll be no movement until next year. It'll be this time next year before we see any more movement.
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. Is that the last story?
I believe it is.
Says a guy in complete control of his period.
Oh yeah, I'm in so much control it just seems unnatural. Yeah, I think that's the end of the period. So we'll move swiftly on to period 3.
Welcome to period 3. This is our general Knocky news. You know, there's no delay anymore. You guys just do that just out of badness now. Period 3 is where we talk about anything and everything else in the world of hockey that we don't think either sits nicely into period 1 or 2, or we just realise that those two periods are far too full and we move stuff into period 3.
Don't give away our secrets.
Guys, I want to start this one. We've already talked a little bit about the CHL. We talked about the innovative new draft that was done, or the selection process, the regular season before we move into the knockout tournaments. If anyone has deciphered it all, get in touch. You can be our CHL correspondent. But guys, let's talk about the rules of the CHL, because this last week they announced that they are going to be introducing some new on-ice rule innovations for the 2023-24 CHL season. Guys, the long and short of it, if I can just give you the key points on this one. Minor penalties, so your basic slashing, tripping, your 2-minute calls, will now be treated the same as a major, in that if a goal is scored, the player in the box does not automatically come back out. The team who have been scored against will continue to play short-handed. A minor penalty will also be served if a goal is scored while a delayed penalty is pending. So a delayed penalty will still be served. So say somebody gets tripped, the opposing netminder goes off to give them the extra skater, they score a goal, the minor penalty will still be served. So again, that team will play 2 minutes or more, 2 minutes short-handed, because it doesn't matter if they score 1 goal or 10 goals, that guy's not getting out because they're going to serve the whole penalty. However, short-handed goals will erase a minor penalty. So if you are skating short-handed and you score a goal, you get your guy back. Dave, what do we think?
I don't know. I want whatever they were smoking. It just seems like whoever, they're having a fantastic time. I don't know. To me, it's trying to fix a problem that doesn't exist.
Yep. My biggest issue with it is I have been pushing and having this conversation with rugby fans for a long time about the yellow cards in rugby, the 10-minute sin binning. I've seen it in a lot of international games where within 10 minutes the score just ramps up so heavily that the game is just... the other 70 minutes of the game just don't matter. Is that what we're heading to with these rule changes in hockey? Marty, are enough short-handed goals scored that this is going to actually mean anything?
I genuinely don't know. Dave said it right. Don't try and fix something that's not broken. Like, what is the, like? I genuinely do not understand why they decided in CHL. Do you know what? Let's make our own rules for these set parts. It just doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand why they think this is gonna make it more exciting, which is what they're saying is going to be. It's going to add excitement.
That's interesting. It's interesting you say that. So the CHL CEO Martin Baumann said that this gives the right balance of innovation, excitement, and the most interesting part of this is the last word that he said: credibility. Does this add credibility to the CHL?
I don't know why. I don't know why you'd want to change it. Like, if everything else in domestic seasons for every team within this playing in this competition in their domestic seasons, they follow the normal standard rule within minor penalties and delayed penalties and all that sort of stuff. They run this. They do the same thing. So to change it for the CHL, just for the CHL, just to
Can we look at this with teal-tinted spectacles for a second?
Yes.
What a lot of Giants fans have made the point of on social media since this was announced is that the Giants, along with other elite league teams, they're known for coming foul of European referees quite a lot and tend to serve quite a lot of minor penalties. Probably a lot more than what we do domestically. Is this going to kill the opportunity for the Giants to win games potentially, or does this level the field with these other opposing teams who also don't play with these rules domestically? Or is the problem that they're not being subjected to a form of refereeing that they're not used to, and it's really going to make no difference to their game at all?
I genuinely think that it's just I don't understand why it's going to make it. I don't know.
Are we worried that there's going to be, like I said, like a rugby score for the Giants at the end of these games?
I genuinely believe that if you're a team that does, and let's be honest, the Giants do kind of tend to take significant penalties at times. There could be a bit of loss of discipline. We talked about. I know you were saying about earlier on about Davy Phillips, and I know Dave, you said he actually had a smaller amount of penalty minutes this last season, but if we do look at the fact that he has been increasing his penalty minutes over the last few years over in Sheffield, if that is the caliber of player that we do have, and a few of those, yeah, I mean, we know how hard of a competition the CHL already is. We know the caliber of the competition we're going to be up against, the Belfast Giants are going to be up against, and I'm not saying that our penalty kill unit won't be strong enough, but I just think it's going to be difficult. I don't understand just generally overall why they've decided to make this change, and it's not even just Belfast Giants' point of view. I just think why.
Yeah, it'll really I think the Giants will be okay because we're generally quite a good penalty killing team, and if you're not letting the goal in, it takes 2 minutes anyway, so. That doesn't really impact us. It's
True.
more the it takes a hiccup. Some of these big teams, they're not fully onboarded yet when they're playing the CHL. Their penalty kill units might not be ironed out, and it could be all it takes is, as you said, 2 or 3 goals, and the game could be lost.
I think the one that baffles me more, the minor penalties in relation to basically the minor penalties dealt the same as a major. So if a team was caused a minor penalty, remains short-handed, even if the opposing team scores, that's fine. That's fine. That doesn't bother me. That's the one that was like, okay, whatever. It's the serving the delayed penalty one, which just doesn't make any sense to me. Like it doesn't, like, you're still going to serve your penalty. You're still going to be serving your penalty, even if the opposing team scores during that delayed penalty. Yeah. And you're still going to have to serve that 2-minute penalty because I think what was the champion? Did the CHL put out a thing of like a penalty is a penalty or something, or what was their Twitter thing that they put out?
Something like that.
It was something like that. It was something like a 2-minute penalty means 2 minutes or something, or it was like really snide, like childish kind of like, I don't know, like really catty kind of comment. And I was like, but why? Like,
the punishments.
It is interesting. Yeah. Well, Look at it in one respect. If you did watch the draw for this year's CHL, you'll know that the Giants effectively have already won it because there was a fan poll was taken during the draw, and just before they finished the draw, they revealed the results of the vote. 24% of the vote thought that the winner was going to come from. Now, this was the interesting part was. For that survey, they chose to put up the GB flag. Whereas for the draw and everything, obviously with the Giants being who they are, what they represent, it was just the EIHL logo. So the 24% of the CHL fans and those who were viewing at that time are absolutely sure that the winners are going to be the Belfast Giants. The funniest thing was the response of the host, Godlover, and Nicholas Backstrom and Pekka Rinne, who were asked, who I don't even think realised that a team from the UK was in the competition. So the host was like, well, what do we think about that? And everyone just kind of went, oh.
Did you see it with the host whenever the Giants? So she called out every time someone got it. It was like the Eurovision, and they talked about how many wins and what they did last year, and then she got the Belfast Giants that play in Belfast, Northern Ireland. They moved on. Clearly nothing else written on her sheet.
Yeah, didn't even mention the fact that we won a Grand Slam this season. Just saying. Right, guys, I'm going to leave that to one side, and let's have a look at the World Championships, and let's start with GB. Because we've already mentioned that GB have once again qualified for the top end, the top flight of hockey, and will take part there. But we have been given a rough idea, or a basic idea of what the groups will be sort of going forward. So GB are moving in what looks to be into Group B. So this is not official yet. There still has to be some conversations and potentially movement. Who will most likely play in Prague next year. And they will play in the group stage against Finland, the USA, Switzerland, Czechia, Denmark, Norway, and Austria. Group A then will play in Ostrava. That will be Canada, Germany, Sweden, Slovakia, Latvia, France, Kazakhstan, and Poland. Guys, have we got the easier draw there, or by avoiding the likes of Canada and Germany? Or does it not really matter? This is top flight hockey and every game's difficult.
It's top flight hockey. Just look at the caliber of teams that are. You say easier, but I don't think it is. Like, look at the caliber of teams that the Team GB have in that group. I mean, you're talking the likes of the Finlands. You're talking about Denmark. Czechia. I mean, that's tough. They're tough teams. They are tough teams. Obviously, USA as well. Sorry. It's great for them to be back up the top in the top end and top groups and stuff, and I think it's phenomenal that they're back up. You can only it's a great it's a great movement in terms. It's a great obviously movement for Team GB, and it's great that they've reached that point. It's going to be a tough one against any of those teams, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, is there teams in Group A that maybe would have been slightly easier for Team GB? I don't know. I actually think that there's a few teams. I think there's a few teams in Group A that actually probably, I say Team GB maybe be on the same level as the likes of maybe like the likes of your Poland's, your Kazakhstan's, Latvia, Slovakia, those types of things. Although let's talk about Latvia in a minute. But I don't know. It's tough to know.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. The other interesting thing that came out of the rankings, so obviously the groups are determined based on the international rankings. For the first time in quite a while, I think 2015, since any nation has topped both the men's and women's division. Canada sit top in both divisions, and that is likely to remain after the Women's World Championships, which are still to be completed. So that's massive. I mean, I know that we say it's the home of hockey, but it's been a while since any nation, let alone Canada, has been at both men's and women's divisions has been at the top. So fair play there. They know their hockey in Canada, so they do. Marty, you mentioned it. Let's stick with the World Championships. Latvia, they had a hell of a time.
They did. Latvia, they had so much so that their parliament had declared that met at midnight after the World Championships took place. On midnight on the Sunday, the Parliament met and declared a public holiday after the national ice hockey team chalked up its best result in the World Championships to date. So the Latvians woke up on Monday morning to find out they were going to have an extra day off. Latvia were hosting the men's championships with Finland, and the country won 4-3 in overtime over the United States to win the bronze medal in that group. I mean, you know, gold medal in that group stage, or sorry, bronze medal in that group stage, and they got a national holiday out of it. I mean, that's a country getting behind their hockey team if I've ever seen one. Guys, what's your thoughts on that?
The footage is absolutely insane. It's the sort of crowd that you see for, I don't know, like winning a war or like crowning a new like king or queen. Like it was absolutely insane. The footage is brilliant. What I didn't also realise is that the plane carrying the team home got permission to fly exceptionally low over Riga as they came into land. So I mean, I said to you guys before we started recording, if this is what they get for bronze, imagine what happens in Latvia if they win gold.
I'm wondering. I love the fact that just from this story, I just want to read this little description from the story. At midnight on Sunday, sporting red and white national team jerseys, members of Parliament convened for a 10-minute session to unanimously declare a holiday. It was. I just think that's just amazing that they were decked in the colours of the national flag, and they just declared a holiday the next day, which further on down this little part, it did say, as dawn broke, some confusion was caused for some workers, as people didn't know who was working and who wasn't. Court hearings were cancelled, schools and universities were closed, but national exams for high school students went ahead with staff paid at holiday rates. Several hospitals chose to stay open to honour doctor appointments. Businesses found themselves in disarray, as basically the Chamber of Commerce hadn't told people that of what was going on with the bank holiday kind of thing. I just think it's hilarious. I think it's genius.
My favourite part is that the Chamber of Commerce and Industry told the public broadcaster it's going to be chaos for a lot of people. It's like we just call it a holiday. It's going to be an absolute disaster, but sure, it's an extra bank holiday. All the best. Everyone who thinks they should be off, just go get drunk.
Well, what it was is obviously the people who were or actually watching the games were already drunk and they just needed the day off.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yep, that's it. That's genuinely it.
Guys, we have a couple more stories, and I'm actually going to throw this one over first because there's another thing I want to finish the period with, which is I think the big talking point from social media in the Elite League this week. But first, and this is something that I had realised, and then I think Mark, the most loyalist listener that we have here on Door 14, he asked this similar question. What the hell is going on with the Stanley Cup final jerseys and the placement of the finals logo on the left-hand side of the jersey?
Yeah,
we all know what it is. We all know what it is, but
before we get into it, I did want to mention that there was 3 topics in this period, in period 3, that were asked more. We were basically put forward by people, by our listeners on Twitter. That was obviously this one, which was about the Stanley Cup final jersey patch location, which we'll talk about now. The story around the CHL and it changes. That was also a story that people were sent us a lot. Like that was, I think it was 3 or 4 people had mentioned that about wanting us to talk about that. So we should just mention that there has been quite a few of these were requested, and also the last story was requested too. But you're right, John, as Mark pointed out, and as we know, we do like a jersey talk on this podcast. What isn't noticeable here, though, what I will say is the image that we're looking at here, which is on the Hockey News Network, they show the Stanley Cup. They show the patch, the Stanley Cup patch, alongside the assistant captain patch, just on the left-hand side of the chest. What is missing from this jersey, which is on the official player's jersey, is the team sponsorship, the jersey sponsor. Remember, we talked about that way back at the start of the season, that some teams were taking on jersey sponsors, some weren't. The jersey jersey sponsorship is on the right hand side, and because the jersey sponsorship is on the right hand side and has exclusive rights to the right hand side of the jersey, the Stanley Cup badge and logo had to be placed on the left hand side beside the assistant captain or the captain C or A. It just looks messy. I can't believe that they decided. Well, I suppose they had to, because obviously whenever they put out the rules at the start of the season, or they put out the guidance at the start of the season around the sponsorship for these jerseys, they were saying, obviously it's an exclusive sponsorship, and I guess they're sticking to their guns, because instead of them moving that sponsorship deal, they just decided to move something I think is more prestigious, which is the Stanley Cup badge, to the other side, and I think it just looks messy.
Why on earth is there needing to be a sponsor on a Stanley Cup jersey? Like, that's the only time that I don't understand. I don't like sponsorship in general. Everyone knows my opinions on that. But the NHL was obviously a very controversial decision anyway to have sponsorship on their jerseys. Surely, by the time you get to the Stanley Cup, all the rights should be different. Like, it should be, because the television rights are different and all that jazz. There shouldn't be any sponsor on a jersey at that point, but especially considering they're not on the replicas, they're not jersey rights, they're not, that's just for basically on the player's jersey for television rights. So it just seems really daft to me.
I just don't like the advertisements full in. I don't mind them being on the helmets. I don't mind if they decide to put them on gloves or on their socks or on their shorts or whatever, but I've never liked the idea of advertisements on the jerseys. Like, to be honest, even sitting behind me, if you're not watching on YouTube, I have this season's Belfast Giants jersey. It is by no means cluttered with sponsorship logos, but there are times where I wish that, even back when I was a season ticket holder, I would have loved the season ticket holder's option jersey to be a clean jersey. I would have loved that option. I would love the option to be able to get a clean jersey if I was going to get one, minus the sponsors. Yes, I understand that our league is completely different and the sponsors are what keeps our teams going, but a jersey, it seems sacred to me, and you can either have a very, very clean jersey, to the other side of me here, I've got my Nashville Predators jersey from before all the advertisements were allowed, or you can have something like a Sheffield Steelers jersey or some of the European jerseys, which are, I'm not joking, some of the European jerseys are disgusting. How many sponsor logos they've got on them. The NHL jerseys in particular. Yeah, there you go. There's Frölunda, which your camera does not want to look at. It doesn't want to look at that jersey.
Your camera had a freak out there.
Nobody wants to see that sort of thing. It's
not only
nonsense.
just there; it's even.
Doesn't matter. Your camera doesn't like it. If you're listening to this on the podcast, go and have a look at 1 hour 46 when Dave's camera decides that nobody should look at the Frölunda Indians jersey. Jerseys just seem sacrosanct to me and shouldn't have this stuff on them. That Stanley Cup logo looks way out of place over beside the Captain's A, Captain C, whatever. And I realise that that's only a handful of the players. That's on, I think, to Chuck's jersey, the A is on that one.
But even at that, it's going to look weird when you take the A away, because obviously they're going to keep it in the same place. So it's going to look strange, because they're going to take the A away and there'll just be a gap. You know what I mean? It doesn't look quite right.
They might do, but they might put it further over. I would assume that they'll put it further over in place of the letter. I would say that placement is because Tkachuk is an assistant captain. At least I would like to hope that's what they're going to do, is move it further out across the chest towards the shoulder, or hopefully further toward. What they should do is put it under the armpit and just hide the advertisement altogether and just get rid of it. But sure, anyway, that's my one. Guys, let us know online what you think about the placement of logos and things. Is the NHL at risk of its jerseys becoming cluttered, and is it going to take away from the team jerseys? I think you know what our answer is, but let us know what yours are. Guys, there was only one big story in Elite League social media wars and trolling and whatever else, call it what you will. I don't know if we're yet at the point of saying former Belfast Giant, but I think that everything is in the cards that he will be a former Grand Slam winning Belfast Giant. Scott Conway has taken aim at the league, and most specifically has taken aim at the officials. In a tweet that was posted a couple of days ago on the 29th of May, he said, and I'll read this verbatim, "Now that the season is over, I can freely express that refs in the EIHL suck. The Scottish refs need gone. Changes need to be made in order for this league to take a step forward." That statement then has led to quite a lot of comments from a variety of people, both from within the league and fans and people out with the league, with Scott actually taking part in conversations with some. Some of the highlights for, in particular, if you follow anything that he does on social media, for example, Dave Sims decided to pop up and say that the league paid you well, bite the hand that feeds you. Scott's response was, lots of leagues would have. That's not the point. You can't look the other way when changes need to happen. Guys, this has carried on. Scott, as we know, has kind of put statements out ever since basically the end of the season, from the minute and moment that he lifted the third trophy of the season. He's been online speaking his mind. Is this statement that he's made, is it true and is it fair for him to make, or as a player and as an ambassador for the game, if you like, has he gone a step too far, Marty?
I think this is definitely a point where, this kind of follows kind of that trend of what happened, at the end of the season, whenever he kind of just let loose on Twitter and with his thoughts and opinions on fans and fan engagement and everything else that happened at that point. And I think there's clear indication that I think there's clear indication that Scott is not coming back to the league next season. I think it's clear, and I think that he has put out something that is probably already I think he's highlighting a common issue that a lot of people believe is an issue here in the Elite League, and that is the refereeing situation. And all these people fighting back and hitting back and saying, well, what's the solution? What do we do? And, he did come back and he said, there needs to be camps held overseas, pay refs more money to come in and train them, don't treat them as, part-time workers and whatever it is, actually develop what it needs to be. He has clearly said certain refs within the league are worse than others. They did mention, the Scottish refs need gone, that they're awful compared to the general other ones. I guess with feedback, with the fact that some of their names hit back and said, well, don't bite the hand that feeds you, and all that kind of comments that were being made. I think he's right. I think there does need to be a development with part of that. And I think what was interesting was he's not the only ex-player then to talk about this, because I see that Nate Halbert then jumped on board after Scott had put out his, and Nate Halbert, who was former Coventry player, he came out and pretty much said the same thing, that refereeing is a huge deterrent for top players coming to this league and staying in the league. Players will come in, but the refereeing gets to a point where that makes them make a decision whether or not they want to continue to play in this league. And he wasn't shut down in the same way that Conway was, for his comments. And he put together three. He actually made more comments about the refereeing in 3 different separate tweets. But there wasn't the same backlash on him, on the comments that he made. And maybe that's because maybe his is more detailed. But I think he makes a fair point.
It was at Valorant as well last season, called out the refs, and again, he maybe didn't use as colourful a language, putting the suck in. That's the only difference. But the man, the myth, the legend, I love Scott Conway. I may continue rattling the hen house, because nothing's going to change in the Elite League unless there's a drama. We know that. We've seen that with the DOPS. It took a drama first to end up with the Department of Player Safety, and
it took Frederick Galakos. It took the Frederick Galakos incident for there to be major changes, and what it feels like is whatever change. And look, we know the inconsistencies. We have chirped about it for the last 2 seasons about what's a fine if you don't know
and
what
we've
it is?
seen-
What's
One thing I've said to Marty as well is I've seen massive improvements in some refs. Over last season, we were talking about it. Like, I used to hate when I seen Hogarth coming anywhere near it, but he has boosted his fitness, and I put him up in the some of the top 5 refs in our league now, where I considered him absolute garbage the first few years we had him, and we always had him. We always have Hogarth, it's just the way it is. But it's, there's somehow some of them are getting development, but others aren't, which is Halas is a prime example.
Yep, I mean, you just have to look at Liam Sewell, for example, getting the call up to the World Championships. So obviously they are doing things right. Look at the previous refs that we've had. Look at Tom Darnell. Tom Darnell, I would have still held him up as being probably one of the best refs that we've seen in the Elite League, and it's a shame that he's not reffing anymore. Understand he's got different things going on. He's running a business and everything now. But it was a real shame to see him leave, because he brought the level of refereeing up within the league, and it's terrible to say that it takes 1 or 2 good referees to bring the level up. The problem is it only takes 1 or 2 to bring it way down as well. And I'll say it, I'll absolutely support Scott's statement in the fact that some of the Scottish referees, when you see them, they do let the team down. They let the team stripes down. There are 1 or 2, I'm not going to name names, but there are 1 or 2 that I see constantly at games, especially this last season, in Dundee, in Fife, and occasionally taking games over in Glasgow. Their fitness is nowhere near where it needs to be. Their game sense is nowhere near where it needs to be. And there's calls being made by, and this is all over the league, this is not in particular these ones, calls being made from 100 or 200 feet away from the referees way behind the play, when another referee is right in the play looking at something and they're not calling it. Now, either they're missing something, or the referee 200 feet away is misseeing something and is calling penalties. So we're nowhere near where we were 4-5 seasons ago, whenever we were still working on the 3-man system. The 4-man system has massively improved, but the problem we're having is the referee pool is going down, because I think there's probably less people moving into it. We can't really call on the same referees that are refereeing in the NIHL, because as far as I know, they're still operating a 3-man system. And again, it's a lower league. It's a lower level of competitiveness. It's probably a lower speed rate as well that you're expected to be looking at. I'll hold my hands up here. I'll go to some NIHL at some point, and I'll guarantee it's probably every bit as fast. But those referees are probably not at that level yet. So something has to happen. Nathaniel Halbert and, in a way, Scott Conway, through some of his replies, have laid out the major issues here, and it's mostly investment. There's 2 key issues. It's investment in their development, and it's paying them so that they'll actually keep and stay within the game. And that's why we lose some of them. The likes of Tom Darnell is because they can go make money doing what they do best in their personal lives. Why would they come out 2 or 3 times a week, get slated for calls that they've missed and slated for calls that they've made, and not get paid appropriately? So the league has to look at it.
And one thing as well that should be, I think, should be looked into in the league is some sort of ref accountability. And something Scott Conway mentions is that at the minute, if you make a bad play and you get a fine or you get a ban, but if a ref makes a bad play, they can just wander off. Might have cost a team a game, but there's no repercussions for them having a bad day.
It's not that there's no repercussions. I mean, there's probably Mike Hicks is director of hockey for the EIHL. He's the head of the refereeing section as well, as far as I know, for the EIHL, or at least he's the guardian of it all. He most likely talks through sort of major penalties or whatever with the on-ice staff, but this comes down to a much bigger conversation that we've had about the Elite League, and it's transparency. If we don't know what's happening behind the scenes, fans will continue getting on the back of players who call out the inconsistencies, or refs who are themselves inconsistent, or a league which appears to not be taking action, or taking action behind closed doors. You look at other leagues and everything is incredibly transparent. Yes, we've held up the NHL, and one of their biggest decisions that they made at the back end of the season, I don't think anyone agrees with, and we wait to see what the result of that's going to be, if there's going to be a challenge to this 2-year ban.
At least we know.
At least it's transparent.
Yep.
At least it's clear
Yep.
about what's going on and why. Now, maybe that one's a bad example, because I think maybe there's a bit of grey area in that one, but with other bans that we've seen through there's transparency about how the penalty points are explained very well. The EIHL, it's put your hand into the M&S bag and pick a number, and that's the number of bans you get. Like, that's, you either get a puck or you get a ping pong ball or a tennis ball with a number on it. You don't know, and that's what it is, and that's the Elite League's problem, is a complete lack of transparency from the owners.
Yeah. We could talk about this for ages, guys, but John, I don't mean to cut you off there, but I think we're already at the 2 hour mark pretty much, and I'm aware that we do have one or two questions in our overtime segment that I do want to ask. I do want to kind of get to, if that's okay, because of the were sent in by listeners and who wanted to kind of get our thoughts on a few bits and pieces. So I do want to move over to that, if that's okay with you guys. So we'll round off period 3 there. We will come back I'm sure next month, and there'll be a few more stories to talk about. But let's move into our overtime segment before we finish off this episode. Stay with us. I know it's 2 hours, but it's worth it, I hope. Basically, the first question that I do want to bring up, because it is another big story, a big topic that we kind of we'll talk about a bit more here in a bit more detail. Ryan Bevan at Bevan777 is one of a couple of people but he was the first one to send a question, but he was one of a few people, and it actually sparked a bit of a conversation on our own Twitter, our own Twitter account under this, so a bit of a thread that was going on. A few people talking about this whole topic. The Elite League today, as of the 1st of June 2023, have rebranded their social media and their website with Elite League logos, which are now void of the Viaplay branding. So the Viaplay branding has been removed from all logos, branding, everything else. Do we assume then that there is a deal termination that has happened here, or that the deal has fully completed? I did see one of the other. I did see on our Twitter account that technically the sponsorship deal was supposed to go on until 2024. So is there something has happened which means that the deal, obviously the deal was originally with Premier Sport. Is it with Viaplay taking over last year, they honoured one more season because it was Viaplay taking over and under new ownership, that they honoured one more season, and therefore that there wasn't going to be additional sponsorship after that one initial season? I mean, Dave, let's go with you first. I mean, obviously this has sparked some interest and some debate around what are going to be the alternative options. If Viaplay have moved away, which have been the ones who have been showing hockey up until this point, obviously Premier Sport before that, where does the options come? Like, where do we move into from this point moving forward?
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. I would have expected Viaplay to honour any sponsorship agreement as part of the purchase of Premier Sport. Obviously, if that's not the case, but you would have assumed as a going concern, it would have contained all the existing contracts and licenses that HITA had in place. If they've decided to walk away from that, if it was Viaplay's decision, hopefully the Elite League got their lawyers on that, because they're expecting a payday then. And if they were looking at other sponsors, it's anyone's guess. It could be anything. It could be what was the skip hire from Wrexham? For all we know.
Yep.
But yeah, we'll see how it all pans out. I do think the Viaplay will continue to show the Elite League. If they're not the sponsor, they'll probably have a reduced number of games. The reason being is Viaplay own all the hockey rights for the NHL as well, so that it sort of makes sense for their UK market to contain it. So, and I would say it'd be cheap.
John, there obviously, with Viaplay, the discussion around the Viaplay deal coming to an end, or whatever the whole topic is around it. Obviously, the Elite League hasn't come out yet and said any official statement in relation to the fact that they've removed the brand, and they haven't said anything in relation to what the movement, what the deal is next year in terms of coverage for the league. I mean, do we see any other big broadcasters stepping in and showing or broadcasting anything next year, or like what is the alternative?
There's plenty of alternatives out there. It's just whether or not they're willing to step in as. I think there's two conversations. There's the conversation about do we have a title sponsor for the league, and there's a conversation about do we have a broadcaster. Those two don't necessarily have to be hand in hand. Previously, we've been on Free Sports and we've had a betting shop, Predictor Bet, which did it even ever bloody launch? God knows. But broadcasting, I'm in two minds about it. The Premier, Free Sports, Viaplay Sports broadcasting, it's very, very difficult to look at it as not having been half-hearted. The number of games that were broadcast steadily went down. The schedules, even if they were released, were subject to change. The product, whilst it was getting better, still wasn't fantastic. There was no real, other than the cup finals, there was no real build-up. There was no sort of looking deeper into the game. I mean, God love it, we probably dive deeper into the game across the IHL than what Viaplay and Elite and Free Sports did, or Premier Sports ever did, which is shocking when you consider who their pundits are, who they've got behind microphones. You've got Aaron Murphy and Paul Adey as the stalwarts who are sitting there. The amount of knowledge that those two guys alone have got of hockey, let alone of British hockey, is just insane. The insight that they could give in a broader spectrum show would have been absolutely fantastic. And then you've got the likes of Colin Shields this season having stepped up to do some sort of colour commentary as well. It's absolutely brilliant, but they weren't given the time, space and a proper platform to really expand on it, which is a real shame. You talk about alternatives. Obviously, the league, or the league's predecessor, had a deal with Sky Sports that went sour. I don't see Sky Sports ever being an option for British hockey again unless it suddenly becomes much, much bigger and we end up with 10 arena teams. It's just not going to happen. BT Sports are in exactly the same position. Your major broadcasters are not going to touch this, especially in a format that requires them to exchange money. That's just not what they're built for. The league is not big enough and doesn't carry enough weight behind it for that. What we need is the likes of a Premier, Viaplay Sports to step in, but actually put the time and effort behind a proper broadcasting system for it.
Yeah.
The other option, and this is the option I would really prefer to see, if I'm totally honest, I would love to see an online 10-team streaming platform.
Yep.
That is what our league is crying out for.
No, this is not. This is probably an argument. This is probably an argument or a discussion. Maybe we want to go into more detail about maybe in a future podcast, and maybe it's something that might pop its head up again. But what I do want to mention to that is, it's funny that you mentioned that, John, in terms of the whole subscription service type idea, or 10-team online, whatever it is. Jackson Whistle, Belfast Giants gold. Well, maybe returning Belfast Giants goaltender, we don't know, has been announced. But Jackson Whistle today on Twitter, actually, there's been a lot of conversation following this. And as you say, John, rightly so, it could just be that the branding and the sponsorship, title sponsorship is gone, and actually the broadcasting stuff is still going to stay with Viaplay. That could still be a thing moving forward. It's not, and there's no actual change to broadcasting. But I think the general gist, or the general belief is, for a lot of fans and a lot of people out there, is that the branding thing goes hand in hand with maybe potential no broadcasting rights, because even Jackson Whistle, on a comment today he made on Twitter, would kind of almost allude to the fact that even he believes that there's maybe there's not going to be a broadcasting thing, because a few people have put out, would a monthly subscription service to watch Elite League streams be better than the current system that's in place with the broadcasters? Jackson Whistle says that 100% it would be better for fans and better for teams and the league, as it would make more money on a sub service, maybe about £12, whatever it is, a monthly unlimited games. Keep championship games separate. You have to pay separate for championship games. However, David Sims has come back and said that actually, if you ask your bosses in Belfast, obviously referring to Jackson Whistle, they'll tell you that the opposite, that it's not a viable thing and actually don't make a lot of money out of it. But I would argue the fact that if you have the 10 teams together and you have a fan base big enough who's going to pay in a subscription fee and it's divvied out between the teams, I'd actually think there's actually probably a big scope for that in terms of the how much they could actually make from it. And would people pay the same amount of money if they were paying the £12 or £15 or whatever it was they're paying to Premier or Viaplay? More than likely, if there was an exclusive online.
And what does Dave Sims know about the Giants' finances?
Yeah, I think he's probably talking from a Sheffield. He's probably talking from a Sheffield point of view, but he won't mention what Sheffield get out of it. And I don't know. But who knows? And I think that is maybe a bigger conversation that will come up. And I think it's something that we'll discuss. But as you say, who knows? The broadcasting rights could still be there with Viaplay. We just people are just putting two and two together at the moment because with the branding being removed, title sponsorship gone. Maybe people are just thinking, well, if the title sponsorship is gone, then that means the broadcasting rights are gone. But as I say, it could just potentially be that when Viaplay took over and bought into the Premier Sport last year, they decided just to honour one more year of a contract and said, look, we can't stand by the Premier Sport contract that they made for you until 2024. We're prepared to give you at least one more year's title sponsor, and then after that, you're gonna have to go and look somewhere else.
Do you know who we should all be thinking about tonight with all of this? And every time there's a Twitter storm regarding the Elite League, it's poor Luke. Like that man's phone must explode every single time he does something as simple as change the logo for the Facebook and Twitter profiles for the league, and then this sort of stuff starts.
It's a misclick. He's meant to click the new Viaplay logo and he hit the just Elite League. And then, shit.
That poor man.
That's funny. It's funny. The last question then, and I did want to get to it before we finished off the episode, and again, this is coming back to our biggest loyalist fan, Mark. His last question, and I suppose it's right to finish on this question. I think it would be a good way to finish the episode. Now that the Giants have announced re-signings, obviously we talked about them at the start of this podcast, what two other players from the last season would you like to see back? Obviously, what he has. I did message him back because obviously there was a sign announced today, which was obviously Norris announced today. And just before I actually messaged him back, and I said to him, I said one of my players I was going to choose obviously has resigned, so I'm gonna have to choose another two. So Dave, I'm going to start with you first. Two players from last season that haven't been announced yet that you would like to see back.
Okay, so say we take Norris out because obviously that's who I was going to be going with.
We're all going with. Don't even start.
No. I'm going with Jackson Whistle. 100% want him back, but I want him to start to make a push for a leadership role and actually try and because last season he was so close to being there. Some of the games he played were outstanding, and I think with Besco announcing that he's only back for one more year, that if Wiss pushes him, Wiss could be a fantastic starter. The year after. My other giant is Mac Stewart. I think he deserves a shout. He done fabulously. He done really good. Obviously, he didn't get a huge amount of ice time, but he played every game he was in. You seen him play, and he was so close to getting some cracker goals. I think he deserves a shout at a full year. And then non-giant, my pick would be for Marcus Crawford, defenseman for the Cardiff Devils, to replace Big Rainer. Big body, perfect plus minus, decent penalty minutes, goals, but an absolute assist machine. I think it would be a fabulous pick for the Giants.
Yeah. Yep. Good shout. John?
I've been trying to push through and figure out who exactly I want. If I could only pick two. And I've got two. Jeff Baum. I want him back. He feels like a real team guy. And if he doesn't stay, we have to stop using LFG because of his dad. So I'm absolutely... I'd be heartbroken if he leaves and takes that hashtag with him. The other giant I would want to see back is Kieran Long. Kieran Long is a guy who I have blown hot and cold with. I think the start of last season, I think he had a bit of a tough run of it. I think it took him a while to get into the season, if I'm totally honest. But by the end of the season, he looked like he really took on a I don't want to say a veteran leadership role, because he didn't. What he did was he was just everywhere on the ice. For a guy his size, he was involved in every forward up front play, and it was absolutely fantastic to watch. He played absolutely brilliant hockey, and yeah, I would have him back like straight away. A player from another team that I would have back, unfortunately there's one who I do want, and I know that he won't be back because he's already re-signed, is Brett Ferguson from Guildford. I think he is absolutely outstanding. He had a standout. You could look up and down that Guildford roster and say that they all had a standout year. They had a pretty terrible last few weeks, but in general, that team is absolutely fantastic, and I'm actually going to pick another guy off that team. And interestingly for me, it's another Brit, and I go Rob Lakovich. Because yet again, I think we have to be really, really smart about the Brit signings that we make, and having that really high end Brit core. Yes, I know that I'm probably eliminating Mac right now with the signings that I would make, because I've concentrated really heavily on the Brits on this one with the signings we've already made, and the signings that I would look at with the likes of Kieran Long, and then bringing in Lakovitz. I just think that's absolutely key to how you move forward in this league, and how we can continue rolling on, because like we're not just defending one or two trophies, we're defending a Grand Slam here. Like, there's a weight of expectation. I'm not even saying it for a joke. There's a weight of expectation on this franchise now, and I think anything less than 2 trophies next season is failure. That's tough. Genuinely how I feel. It's a tough act to follow.
Yep, I agree.
What about you, Marty?
Yeah, for me, the 2 players definitely that I would like to see back. For me, and I know they haven't been announced. At least I don't think. At least one of them has been announced of leaving there, going anywhere else. Matt Foley, defenseman Matt Foley, impressed me this year. I really enjoyed watching him. I thought he was a really good addition to the team in this previous season. I would love to see him back on the ice for the Belfast Giants next season. I thought he was a good, strong defenseman, and I think, like to see him return. And for me, I think again, maybe a late on signing, maybe came in a bit later in the season. But Newells for me was a great signing through the season, and I think Newells actually was low key actually made a big difference. His as a center player, he was clocking up ice time left, right, and center, and his face-offs were, his face-off percentage at one point, I think, even for the finals, the Challenge Cup final, I mean, second to none. His percentage was up really, really high even at that point. And I know you could say, oh, he's against 5 Flyers. Doesn't matter. I think his overall face-off percentage was quite high. Someone can obviously give us the details. I'm sure Davey.
The Steelers after all.
Sorry.
5 Flyers beat the Steelers after all.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure Davey from the Bridge can give us that information in terms of what the percentage was. But I think Newells was a great signing, and I'd like to see him come back for a full season. I think that would be my choices anyway.
Mark,
okay.
Mark, tell us who yours are.
Yep, let us know.
Sure,
guys. What? Oh, mine?
Yeah.
Did I ask for non-giant?
No, but Mark did.
Oh, did he? Oh, yeah, he did.
You copied and pasted his question in. You didn't even read it.
Apologies. I did ask. I was distracted by something else. I actually don't know. I didn't think. I genuinely don't know. I can't answer your question. I'm sorry. I'm not going to even pretend to lie right now because I don't even know. Guys, I'm going to call it for this episode because we are quite late in. I am going to call it there. We'll put an end to the episode.
Happy third commute to work, everyone.
Yeah, for those enjoying the sun, at least you can sit outside for 2.5 hours nearly and listen to us and talking on. But there was a lot to talk about, and we wanted to talk about it, so listen to us in sections. It's good saying that right at the end of the podcast, but yeah, we'll put out a message to say it's a long one. Don't worry, guys. With that, we will sign off for this month. We will come back maybe potentially next month for another off-season special, off-season roundup, just to catch up with things to see, so that when it comes to our actual regular season, come late August, our episodes aren't still 2 hours long. They normally are, but still, we'll try and work it down. Guys, we'll sign off. As usual, we will point you in the direction of our website, door14hockey.com, where you can get this episode plus all the other episodes in our back catalogue on our website. You can check us out on social media, on all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at door14hockey.
And that one TikTok.
And one TikTok. And also then check out, whatever your podcast provider is of choice, make sure you give us a like, thumbs up, subscription, whatever it might be. It really does help us get out there and get the message across of Door 14 Hockey. I do want to put a just big shout out and a big thank you to everyone who did that post playoffs. You have no idea how much of a big difference that made. I know we joked around about those cards that we gave out playoffs, but it must have made a difference because we can clearly see that there has been a lot of new listeners, shall we say, over the course of the last 2 months. So thank you very much for any new listeners who've came and joined us on this podcast. We really do appreciate it. Continue spreading the word for us, and I'm sure hopefully next season we can continue to do the same ourselves. We will sign off for this week. I'm Marty.
I'm Dave.
I'm John.
Have a great month.